The 2026 Formula One season has finally begun in Melbourne, and after the first practice sessions and the first qualifying of the year, one thing is already clear. The new regulation era has completely reshaped the competitive order of Formula One. Some teams arrived looking dominant, others looked lost, and a few surprises have already shaken the paddock. Ferrari showed flashes of incredible pace during practice. Mercedes suddenly looked like the team to beat in qualifying. Red Bull faced unexpected problems, and the brand-new energy systems introduced in 2026 are already creating chaos across the grid. The Australian Grand Prix weekend has given us the first real clues about who might control this new era of Formula One, but it has also raised a lot of questions. Before we dive deeper into everything that happened in Melbourne, make sure you hit the like and subscribe to F1 Grid. Let's begin with Ferrari, because during the early stages of the weekend, it genuinely looked like the Scuderia might have arrived with a very competitive package. In the first practice session, Charles Leclerc topped the timesheets with Lewis Hamilton right behind him, giving Ferrari an impressive 1-2 result. But what made this performance interesting was not just the lap time itself, it was the way Ferrari achieved it. Telemetry analysis suggested that Ferrari were not actually pushing their car to the limit on the straights. Instead, they appeared to be using a strategy that engineers call super clipping, where the car deliberately sacrifices a small amount of straight-line speed in order to harvest more electrical energy into the battery system. That energy can then be deployed later in the lap, usually in critical sectors where extra power can make the biggest difference. In simple terms, Ferrari were not even trying to set the fastest lap possible, and yet they still finished at the top of the timing sheets. That immediately raised eyebrows across the paddock because it suggested that the SF26 might have more performance available than what we initially saw. Another interesting storyline from Ferrari's side of the garage was Lewis Hamilton's early adaptation to the car. After several difficult seasons trying to understand different car characteristics, Hamilton looked surprisingly comfortable behind the wheel of the Ferrari. His communication with the engineers during practice was calm and methodical, particularly when discussing engine braking settings and power deployment maps. Once those settings were adjusted, Hamilton's lap times improved almost instantly, showing that he was quickly building confidence with the car. However, the picture became more complicated once the second practice session began. Oscar Piastri ended the session fastest for McLaren with a lap time in the 1:19 range, while Ferrari dropped further down the order. At first glance, it looked like Ferrari's earlier pace might have been misleading, but when analysts started looking deeper into the data, a different story emerged. Ferrari spent most of the session running with heavier fuel loads and focusing on long-run simulations rather than qualifying pace. Their engineers were collecting data about energy deployment and battery management over extended runs, which is extremely important under the new 2026 power unit regulations. Those long-run simulations suggested that Ferrari might actually be very competitive during race conditions. When analysts adjusted for the heavier fuel loads, Ferrari's projected race pace appeared to be slightly ahead of several of their rivals. Still, both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton were careful not to overhype the car after Friday's sessions. Both drivers emphasized that the SF26 has strong potential but still needs development throughout the season. Ferrari has started seasons strongly before, only to lose performance later in the year, so the team is clearly trying to stay realistic. While Ferrari showed promise, the biggest surprise of the weekend came from Mercedes. During qualifying, Mercedes suddenly looked incredibly strong, and their performance raised serious questions about whether they may already have the fastest power unit under the new regulations. George Russell produced a stunning lap in the 1:18 range during qualifying, putting the Mercedes comfortably ahead of the rest of the field. The speed difference was particularly noticeable on the straights, where Mercedes appeared to have a significant advantage in power deployment. The 2026 power units rely heavily on complex energy management systems, where electrical power is constantly harvested and redeployed throughout the lap. Mercedes seems to have mastered this system better than anyone else so far. Their engine not only produces strong acceleration, but also maintains energy deployment for longer periods compared to other teams. That combination makes the Mercedes package extremely effective, especially at circuits like Melbourne, where energy recovery and deployment play a major role in performance. Mercedes' long-run pace also looked impressive during practice sessions. Both Russell and young rookie Kimi Antonelli showed consistent lap times, suggesting that Mercedes might not only be strong over a single lap, but also across full race distances. Antonelli himself had a dramatic weekend after crashing heavily during practice, which forced the Mercedes mechanics to rebuild his car just hours before qualifying. Despite that setback, he still managed to deliver a competitive performance, showing that the team has both speed and resilience early in the season. Meanwhile, Red Bull experienced a far more complicated start to the new era. Max Verstappen's weekend took a dramatic turn during qualifying when his car suddenly lost stability under braking entering Turn 1. The rear wheels locked unexpectedly, causing the car to spin and crash into the barrier. The incident appeared to be related to the complex regenerative braking systems used in the new power units. These systems recover energy through the rear axle, and if the recovery settings are too aggressive, they can cause the rear tires to lock under braking. That seems to be exactly what happened to Verstappen. The car's energy recovery system may have applied too much braking force to the rear wheels, leaving the driver with no chance to recover the car once the slide began. Red Bull engineers believe the issue was likely a software calibration problem rather than a fundamental flaw with the car, which means it should be fixable. However, the incident highlights how difficult these new power unit systems are to manage, even for the most experienced teams. Interestingly, Verstappen's teammate Isaac Hadjar actually performed very well throughout the weekend. He managed to reach the final stage of qualifying and demonstrated that the Red Bull package still has competitive speed when everything works correctly. Beyond the top teams, several other storylines also emerged from the Australian Grand Prix weekend. Audi, making its full Formula One debut as a manufacturer, delivered a surprisingly strong performance by reaching the final qualifying session. Considering that Audi has built its power unit program from scratch, this result suggests that they could become a competitive force sooner than many people expected. On the other hand, some teams struggled significantly. Williams and Alpine appeared to be among the slowest teams on the grid, and both teams faced reliability problems that limited their running throughout the weekend. Aston Martin also had a very difficult start to the season. Reports from inside the paddock revealed that the team arrived in Melbourne with serious battery reliability issues affecting their Honda power unit. At one point, the team reportedly had only a very limited number of functioning battery systems available for the race weekend. Despite those problems, Fernando Alonso still managed to extract reasonable performance from the car and came surprisingly close to advancing further in qualifying. One of the most interesting technical talking points of the weekend involved the new straight-line mode and energy deployment zones introduced under the 2026 regulations. At one stage, the FIA even considered removing one of the straight-line deployment zones at the Melbourne circuit due to safety concerns. That decision created confusion among teams because it would have dramatically changed how energy was managed throughout the lap. After strong opposition from several teams and drivers, the FIA eventually reversed the decision, allowing the session to proceed under the original configuration. This situation highlights one of the biggest challenges with the new regulations. The cars are now heavily dependent on complex energy strategies, and even small rule adjustments can dramatically change performance across the entire grid. The new energy management systems are also creating unusual situations during qualifying. Some drivers are deliberately slowing down during parts of the lap in order to recharge their batteries, while others finish their laps with significantly more speed as they deploy the remaining stored energy.
This makes it much harder to interpret lap times and sector performances because the fastest sector does not always mean the fastest overall lap. A driver might push aggressively in the first sector, but then lose time later because they have already used too much energy. All of this adds a new strategic layer to Formula One, but it also means teams are still learning how to optimize these systems. After the first qualifying session of the season, the early competitive picture is starting to emerge. Mercedes currently appear to have the strongest overall package, especially in terms of power unit performance and energy deployment. Ferrari look competitive, particularly in race simulations, but they still need to solve some deployment and consistency issues. Red Bull remains a potential threat if they can resolve their reliability and energy management problems, while McLaren continues to show solid pace and could easily challenge near the front depending on track conditions. With the first race of the 2026 season about to begin, one thing is certain: the new regulations have completely reshaped the sport, and the battle between these teams is only just getting started. If Melbourne is any indication of what's coming next, we could be heading into one of the most fascinating and unpredictable Formula One seasons in recent history. And if you enjoyed this breakdown of everything we learned from the Australian Grand Prix weekend, make sure you subscribe to F1 Grid and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video as we continue covering the biggest stories from the 2026 Formula One season.